Well, our special guest on NDTV today is the Prime Minister of Norway, Prime Minister Erna Solberg. The first visit, in fact, by a Norwegian PM to India in a decade, ma'am. Thank you for speaking to us on NDTV today. Why has it taken 10 years for a Norwegian PM to come here?
I'm not so sure. We've tried, I think, to come, been interested in it, and then we have election, then India has election, and it's always difficult to find the right time. But I think it doesn't mean that India and Norway have not had a cooperation in between. We've had a cooperation on different issues in between those 10 years. So you don't always need to have a prime minister here to make things moving.
You are traveling to India with a very large business delegation. It's almost 150 business leaders who are coming with you. Is that a signal that will be sort of the key focus of the India-Norway relationship?
Well, I think we have two different legs to stand on. The one part is business cooperation, the fact that our economies are quite complementary. We are, of course, a much smaller country, but I think the type of businesses that we have in Norway is complementary to some of the business areas that also is developing in India. And so I think there's a good way of coupling them and to work together. The second leg is, of course, the interest we have for global issues. I think there is a need in these days for countries, both big and small, who believes in a rule-based international cooperation to work together on those global goals that need to be focused when some are withdrawing from the international organizations and
You're talking about Trump?
Talking about Trump, but I'm also saying that there are other countries in the world who are becoming less democratic these days and who seem to be less focused on election, human rights, on international trade. You see in Europe a tendency, not among the voters, to vote for more protectionism in some countries, and which is also challenging.
Coming back to the issue of Norwegian business in India, you already have over 100 Norwegian companies that are doing business here. What has their experience been like, especially in the last few years, where India has sort of gone up in the ease of doing business rankings, and yet I think there is still some way to go. What has been their experience, and where do they think that India could sort of do better to make their business actually easier to do?
Well, I think there's a lot of possibilities. Then, of course, red tape is always difficult. How long does it take to get the permission? How long does it take to put up and get the cooperation with an Indian company going between a Norwegian one and an Indian? And of course, there's always a challenge on areas like public bidding to make sure that those processes are transparent enough so that you don't end up in a situation a couple of years later that someone will ask if there was something wrong with the whole bidding process, and then you will have insecurity around that. I think those issues are things that is still important to sort out. It's from local government to state governments where this is important. So
the red tape is still there.
The red tape is still what companies have said. It takes too long to make decisions sometimes, and secondly, it's of course make sure that the policies are stable, so that there will not be a policy shift in an area. For example, a lot of Norwegian companies are working in the energy sector, and of course energy is an important part of infrastructure, so it's a public interest area, so it's important to have stable systems around that to make sure that the investments, in fact, when the return on the investment comes, there is a return.
I guess there must be a concern that Indian courts can also step in and reverse.
Yes.
When you're talking about bidding, for example.
And that's why I say transparency in the process of bidding, because to make sure that that is a transparent and lawful system that is done, because that's one of the challenges if you look to the past times with some of the processes.
In fact, I'm just going to refer to a business climate survey that was done at the end of 2016. It was done by the Norwegian Business Association and the Norwegian Consulate in Mumbai. And at that time, 62% of Norwegian companies said that they found the business climate in India favorable, but that 50% of them felt that the bureaucracy and 41% that corruption was still two main aspects affecting their business prospects in India. Do they still feel that way?
Well, I don't know if we have a newer survey than that on the Norwegian business. I think that's probably the newest. But I think, as I said, there's been a very good development. And it's important to continue with that. I think good, stable frameworks for foreign investments is an important aspect of getting more investments. I think it's for India and for the rest of the world. And I think there has been some experience of too long process in big investments that for some companies have been difficult. But that they are in past times. So, but it takes when you have that type of experience, it takes a little bit of time to get over it.
In fact, when this survey was done, it was done shortly after the big move of demonetization was announced by Prime Minister Modi. And one of the concerns expressed in this survey was that demonetization would have an impact on Norwegian businesses in India, that there just would not be enough cash. Do you think that has been overcome now, or those effects are still there?
The fact that we have the biggest group of business people with us for this short visit to India does really say that they are interested and are looking with positive prospects, because they would not have come here if it wasn't because they thought that the business opportunities were better and bigger.
One of the recent issues that raised eyebrows here was the former Prime Minister of Norway, Mr. Bondevik, coming to Jammu and Kashmir and meeting Kashmiri separatist leaders here. He then went on to what we call Pakistan-occupied Kashmir on the other side and met leaders there. Was there any official nod by your government or by the Indian government for his visit here?
No, and he runs a private institute, the Oslo Peace Institute, that have been working, separately on different issues and policy issues to try to solve them. I think he was invited, and I think, but there's no Norwegian government doesn't work like that. We do a lot of peace negotiation and around the world, but that's by invitation by the partners, not by single visitors who go to see it. But I think Mr. Bondevik wanted to. I think he was invited, and he wanted to see if there were some possibilities of helping out. But there's no official mission, and it was not on a mission from the Norwegian government.
But sometimes it doesn't have to be an official mission. Sometimes it can be off the books, because people here are not buying it. I mean, there's a lot of skepticism about, whether there was more to this visit than meets the eye.
Well, there is nothing more from the government side that meets the eye. So you can't ask me about that, because we don't really. We had no thoughts and missions around that visit. Although I always hope that we will find a solution, get the partners to sit down, decrease violence in the area and all of that. But that's up to the partners locally to initiate.
Do you see any sort of scope for mediation by Norway between India and Pakistan? And I ask this because Norway has played, as you mentioned, a traditional peacekeeping role around the world, in Sri Lanka and other countries. Do you think there is a possibility of Norway stepping in here?
If there is an interest from the partners, we will try to use the mechanisms that we know. We've been working quite a lot in different countries, but we always have this one basic thinking. The partners need to sit down by a table and discuss. And then, of course, if there is a need for a mediator, a need for a facilitator to things, even though these are two very big countries that should maybe manage to sort out things between themselves.
Do you think that India and Pakistan should be talking more to each other?
I think all countries in the world should be talking more, and I think both countries should decrease military expenditure, especially. And I think that's just because we need more money for other areas to boost development on health, on education. But I think that means that you have to try to decrease tension between countries, and after such a long time, it's a long time since 1947, so now it probably should be time to find good approaches between the two countries. But it's up to the countries. It's not a Norwegian mission.
One of the things Mr. Bondevik, the former Prime Minister of Norway, said after his visits to the Kashmirs of India and Pakistan was that he believed that there was no military solution to Kashmir. Is that a view the Norwegian government sort of shares as well?
Well, I don't think there is a military solution to any situations like this. I think you have to have popular support. I think you have to have grow trust between partners in any region where there still is a conflict. But we don't have a special meaning about whether it's a military solution in Kashmir or not. But I think what we have learned to be in almost all in all of those different conflict areas that we have been is that you never build lasting peace based just on military systems. You have to build them by popular support and by getting women and youth into a peace process and getting, that's when you build this solid peace in an area that have been conflict and that. But this is a general basis. We don't really have any special views on Kashmir on what is the solution. The only thing we know, it has to make sure that all partners are talking to each other.
One of the stated objectives of the new India policy that your government unveiled only last month before your visit was to support India's efforts to reduce its emissions and to meet its targets under the Paris Climate Agreement, and that one of those ways in which Norway would do that would be to help India with clean technologies, for instance, electric cars. Can you tell us more about that? And, and firstly, I just want to ask you, I just want to look at the pollution levels on my phone. You are here currently in probably one of the most polluted cities in the world. You know that Delhi often tops that. Right now, the AQI is very unhealthy, which is actually an improvement. So it speaks very poorly of Delhi's air quality. What would you say to that? I mean, climate change is a huge thing for Norway. Fighting pollution is a huge foreign policy objective of Norway. When you come to Delhi and you see this terrible sort of pollution around you, what do you think?
Well, that affects, of course, the people who live here the most. And most of this pollution is not CO2 emissions because they are not unhealthy to people. It's the effect of it to the whole world and the climate change. But I mean, all people have the right to breathe fresh air, and in all countries we should work on decreasing pollution. My country has, in some of our cities, especially at winter time these days, also a pollution problem. But we don't reach that high targets as you have in Delhi. But we still feel the air, and of course people who have asthmatic, who have breathing problems, will have large problems on a day like this. This is an issue that for the people of Delhi it should be worked on, like it is an issue in my hometown Bergen that we are trying to work on.
So how can you help us with your technologies?
We have policies on electrical cars, for example, which makes it beneficial to buy one, meaning that we are taxing on emission, taxing the different factors of emissions. So we have so we make sure that it's much more expensive to buy a polluting car than buying an electrical car. But if you're going to do that, you have to have possibilities of charging. So you have to build a network of chargers and system of that. We don't
higher taxes on cars.
Higher taxes on cars that are polluting and cheaper on those who are non-polluting is biggest recipe. But you also have to build out the infrastructure. You have to make sure that you have chargers around, so that, because the one thing that is the biggest obstacle for a car buyer to buy an electrical car is that the range of that car is too small, and then you have to be easy to charge it. That's where we do have companies that are working on charging system, fast charging, how you can monitor charging from the outside, how you can, so we are doing that.
So this is an area of interest with India?
Where we can work with India on. The biggest technological things that we are working on emissions is, of course, where we have our biggest technology competences is in the maritime sector, which we are nearly building all our ferries on low emission or zero emission. We are building passengers, fast passenger ships that is also on zero or low emission systems, and we have which is a technology cooperation that is possible to work on.
Well, finally, Madam Prime Minister, I thought I would also take this opportunity to ask you, as a woman leader, your thoughts on the Me Too movement that sort of really swept the headlines in 2017 and 2018. How do you look at it and the way it has impacted professions and industries across the board?
Well, I think the Me Too movement was extremely important because it focuses on, of course, violence against women is a big issue in a lot of countries, and also in both India and in Norway, it still is violent in domestic affairs. But now it focuses on the fact that there is a hierarchy and a sexual abuse and sexual harassment in a lot of different parts of our sectors. And I think it was an eye-opener to the way, to how women might feel in, you know, when jokes, when hidden jokes, when they feel that they have to participate in activities that they don't like because it's part of their culture and their business. If it's in theater, or if it's in businesses, or if it's in politics. In Norway, some of our biggest scandals was in politics, in fact, and understanding that this disparity, especially between, you know, of course, sexes, but also between age groups, there is a lot of men at my age who believes that all young girls, because they have power, all young girls will like to have a sexual relationship with them. And maybe this was understanding that some of them felt more or less forced into that, because if not, their career would be stopped and other things. And the feeling.
Do you think that's sort of shaken that?
It's shaped in that. I think it was good because it opened you know, the eyes, I think, to a lot of people on you know, just behaving nice. I think what's wrong with the world where people are behaving nice towards each other and understanding that, you know,
small things matter.
Small things matter, yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Madam Prime Minister, thank you very much for speaking to us on NDTV today. Thank you.
Thank you.